Welcome back, everyone. We enjoyed hearing from all the people who watched us or listened to us last week. It's always very much appreciated, and we hope you enjoy this week's edition as well. We're going to dive straight into this parsha of Chayei Sarah. Chayei Sarah really consists of two main stories. The story about מערת המכפלה, and a story that's recounted twice in our parsha, which is the finding a wife for Yitzchak. We've decided to concentrate on the beginning of the parsha, which is the purchasing of מערת המכפלה by Abraham from the Bnei Chet. And again, the Torah, when it tells you a story in Sefer Bereshit, especially if it says it in what seems to be unnecessary length, teaches us very important lessons. I want to preface by saying that this specific story really does benefit from a close reading. You can see from the different conversations Avraham and the Bnei Chet and Ephron had that there's a lot of very small differences between each request and each response. But again, the goal of this podcast specifically is not to concentrate on those, although there is a lot of benefits. So we encourage everyone to read, and we will get a little bit into the nitty gritty here of the wording. But we're going to try to stay high level and speak about the general story, why it's mentioned, and what the real goal of both Avraham, Bnei Chet, and Ephron were throughout this parsha.
I just want to say two things here. Interestingly enough, the parsha is named Chayei Sarah, and it's talking about the death of Sarah and their burial. Something very similar we find in Parashat Vayechi Yaakov, where the main part of the parsha is talking about Yaakov passing away. And apparently there is a reason for this, because the life of both Sarah and Yaakov did not end. They continue with their children, and indeed the two stories are actually a portal to the next generation. By the story of Sarah, we are going to introduce the next generation, the generation of Yitzchak and Rivka, and in the story of Yaakov, in Vayechi, we introduce the shift from Yaakov, the last patriarch, to the Shvatim that are going to establish the nation. This is one comment. I do think that actually looking into the words of what happened in the story might inspire us to see why indeed the Torah, to understand why indeed the Torah took a simple story of purchasing a piece of land, a real estate, and made it like a long story describing every detail, what Abraham said, what he was answered with, what he responded, what the Bnei Chet said, what Ephron said. Apparently, the Torah wants to tell us that this is a very important story, and we will try to delve and to see the importance of this story.
Regarding the first point, you said, why is the parsha called this or that? Is it not just, we looked for the most unique words in the first pasuk of the parsha and just find it, and since it says Chayei Sarah, or since it says Vayechi for Yaakov, we just take that word. It seems like you're treating it with seriousness that's not just utilitarian. Let's name the parsha based on whatever we find in the first pasuk and call it that.
Well, for many centuries, you define the parsha not by the episode that are happening there, but by the name of the parsha. So I guess that our sages, who were very, very careful in every word, and they paid lots of attention to the words and admired the text, if they gave this parsha the name of Chayei Sarah, they saw something in those words to reflect much more than the little episode of Sarah dying or Sarah burial. They see it as Chayei Sarah. Apparently, what happened in our parsha, in a way, reflects on the life of Sarah, and we cannot understand the life of Sarah if we don't understand the stories of this parsha. That's the way I see.
Very interesting. So let's dive into this beginning of the parsha. Like we said, in terms of Sefer Bereshit, this is a quite a long story, and interestingly enough, it's really the last thing that Abraham does. You know, he speaks to Eliezer about finding a wife for his son, but really the last thing that Abraham does is purchasing this Me'arat HaMachpelah. So why does the Torah spend a lot of time on what is essentially, like you said, a simple real estate deal? It's something you have to do. We bury the dead, but why is the Torah going back, especially about the negotiation back and forth between Abraham and the Bnei Chet?
So, in order to answer that, we have to ask ourselves what's the purpose of this episode? Because on the surface, it looks like Sarah died. You cannot leave a dead person, just like that. You have to bury him, and there was an urgent need to bury Sarah. And actually, we see something very interesting in this parsha, that it's not so simple. Today, if you are going to bury a person in Eretz Israel, where the land belongs to us, but Abraham, as he defined himself, Ger betoshav anochi imachem, he did not own this land. There were promises, it's all true, but he did not own 1 meter in the land of Israel, and now he has to bury Sarah. So this by itself is not a simple thing. He has to negotiate and to have a place to bury Sarah. So one way to understand the story is how many efforts Abraham did in order to bury Sarah, and what did he have to go through, and actually jumping through hoops, as they say, in order to bury Sarah, which was very, very urgent.
I think we can assume, based on everything we know from the Torah, that Torah is not teaching us negotiation tactics here, and it's not even clear really who won the negotiation and what changed. If you look carefully in the Psukim, you'll see that there were really 3 encounters between Avraham and Bnei Chet. But again, the negotiation, he went from asking for it as a gift and then buying it and then overpaying for it. It's clear that it's not for the purposes of the negotiation. What exactly is the Torah trying to teach us by going through this negotiation from start to finish?
First of all, I would say that the Torah want to highlight the idea of negotiation because it's a great lesson even in our generation. After all, the simple question is why there was a need to negotiation. Abraham got the promise from Hashem, the land is his. He had to come like the Bala boss. I'm coming, you should know, like God promised me the land, and the land is me. Give me right now like a small piece to bury my wife, but actually you are sitting in my land. And the Torah teaches us that no, although there was a promise, we have to do our part. With all the divine promises, it does not take away the responsibility of a person to do as much as he could in order to fulfill the promise of Hashem. It's not easy. It's called nisayon. But the Torah is teaching us that you cannot just walk away when you have like the document in your pocket. Hashem promised me that. Abraham knew that he has to do something in order to materialize this promise. And negotiation themselves are teaching us that, although we have the promise from Hashem, it does not mean that we don't have to do anything and to wait until it's going to be fulfilled. The promise is that if we are doing our part, Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, will complete what we are doing. And this is a major lesson. And when it comes to purchasing a field, there are ways to do it. Sometimes a deal can be very, very tough. You need a highly skilled negotiator in order to execute the deal. And Abraham was not shy from applying these skills as negotiator in order not to get the field, but to fulfill and to materialize the promise of Hashem. And there is nothing bad about it. So the lesson of negotiation itself is important. Just want to say one more thing because I think it might touch upon a thing that we have. The story of Abraham purchasing the land is not the story of one person purchasing the real estate, even for himself, even for his family, even Achuzat Kever for the generations to come. we have to understand that the promise of Hashem to Abraham is a change of history. There will be a nation that will have the power and the talent and the capability to educate the world. That's why Hashem chose Abraham. And our job is to inspire the world. And Abraham knew it very, very well. He knew that if he comes and try to get the field um, uh, just by the promises of Hashem or by doing all kinds of shticks, he's going to maybe get the field, but he's going to lose the main message that here comes a person who really respect the other side, really respect his property, really respect the way people get their property and real estate. So Abraham here is also a mechanech. He's teaching us how we approach our own job. We do it with a highest standard of rights and respect and appreciation to the other side. And in this regard, it's very, very interesting that even the Medinat Israel, people don't know it because they think it was only like colonialized decline that allowed the Jews to get the land of Israel, the Egyptian to get Egypt. But the truth is that from the moment Herzl appeared on stage, there was a massive movement of purchasing the land. Like most of the land of Eretz Israel was purchased by good money. And remember, this is not the land we know today. This was swamps. This was a land with malaria and very few people who lived there. And nevertheless, with money that was collected all over the world, if it was Keren Kayemet, if it was all kinds of other funds, we purchased this land. And we did it on the highest standard, and we did not just wait for Britain to hand us over the land for free. This is simply historical mistake, which is very important. And I think we learned it from Abraham. Abraham made a promise and nevertheless purchased the land in the highest price, which was not even imagined. I understand the whole story in the following way. I don't think that Ephron ever wanted to sell Abraham the land. They were the owners of the land, and especially in their times, the land was the family was something that went from one generation to another, the source of power, the source of tradition. Land was everything. And you see it, by the way, even in the Jewish law, in Yibum, when you want to continue the legacy of the deceased brother, he does not get only the wife and the children are named after the deceased brother. You get also inheritance. You get the land, the fields, because fields and memory are tied together in Jewish thought and actually, I believe, in the ancient world to everyone. This was everything that the family owned and went from one generation to another. So I don't think that Ephron wanted at all to sell the field to Abraham. And in order to not let Abraham purchase the field, he did two things. Abraham spoke about a place of burial. What Ephron did, Ephron actually said the following: you want the spot for burial? You have to buy it with a field. He thought, okay, Abraham is going to decline. He just wants a place to bury Sarah. I'm not happy about this one. I don't want any place here to be named after Abraham's family. So I'm going to make this deal impossible. I will offer him the field. This is going to be very, very expensive, and he's not interested. And it's going to be black and white. And he thought that Abraham will go away or agree to get it as a gift, which make no commitment on the side of the people of Hebron to respect the rights of Abraham as the owner of the land. So this was one thing, and actually made a terrible mistake, because the moment Abraham heard the word Sadeh, I think he jumped on the opportunity and said, yes, 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 of course, I'm going to buy the Sadeh and the Me'ara. By the way, you see, the description of the Torah, in the beginning, it's only the Me'ara, the place for burial. But the moment Ephron mentioned the Sadeh, the order is changed. Vayakom hasadeh ve'hama'ara asher bo. First of all is the sadeh, because now it became a completely different story, not a story about buying a burial place, but a purchase of piece of land in Eretz Israel and fulfilling the promise of Hashem. The second thing was obviously the exaggerated amount of the deal. Every business person would walk away from the table once he heard 400 shkalim of kesef over lasocher. This was a huge amount of money. Just think about it. You know, when the brothers are selling Yosef, they sell a slave for 20 shkalim. Slave who is going to work there for his entire life. I guess this was like high price. Now here we are talking about 20 times more expensive of a piece of land for what? Something which was not, this was a burial site, Me'ara, that you don't work, you don't get the trees and the vegetables from. It's maybe the worst part of the field, as indeed burial places were. And 400 shkalim kesef over lasocher. I'm sure that everyone saw there is no chance that Avram will agree to it. But Avram looking upon the whole episode in a very different eyes. He did not see a burial place in front of him. He saw an opportunity, as I said, to fulfill what Hashem promised him and Sarah, who is now dead, but it was not only for both of them, it was for their children and their grandchildren and until us, to have a land, the land of Canaan, to their descendants. And Abraham was willing to pay whatever it's going to take.
Yeah, very interesting. And to fortify what you're saying is we can see, and again, this is something interesting that a lot of times we had this with Sodom and Sefer Yechezkel last week, but here we have in the end of Sefer Bereshit, where Yaakov, he blesses all the children, then says, please bury me where? במערה אשר בשדה המכפלה, אשר על פני ממרא בארץ כנען. What does he say? אשר קנה אברהם את השדה, that where Avraham bought the field,
Very interesting.
the field. He will be buried in the cave, in the Me'ara. Why is he mentioning the purchase? So it clearly was for Yaakov. It was obvious that he wasn't just purchasing the cave as to be able to bury his wife, and for sure Avraham knew that this would become like a family burial
100%.
plot.
100%. And by the way, this repeat itself also when they bury Abraham. The Torah repeat again that it happened in the same field that Abraham purchased. This became an iconic moment in in Jewish history. This was a time where the promise of Hashem was fulfilled. Yes, it was very expensive, but nevertheless, Abraham got, against all odds, his part in Eretz Israel.
And it is important to, and I didn't know this, before doing a little bit of research. I always thought Bnei Chet, he was walking into Hebron, that's these Neanderthals that don't really know how to do business. We have to understand that the Hittite Empire was a huge empire for hundreds of years that took over all of Turkey. With the majority of the world at that time, or at least a very large proportion of it, was controlled by the Hittites. So this wasn't like this group of primitive people who were trying to make a buck here. They had rules, they had laws about how you can sell. And then again, a lot of the commentaries, especially the more modern ones, do speak about how it's really a legal parsha here. Like, how do you sell something to someone who has no rights to the land? So they had to give it to him as a gift, but he also had to pay for it. Again, it's very interesting to read about that. But clearly, like you say, this was a symbolic acquisition that wasn't meant just for that time. And then the reason Avraham was willing to pay so much money was because he didn't see it as just a place to bury Sarah and again the other patriarchs and matriarchs who were later buried there, but really as kind of to anchor himself in the land, both in terms of buying the Me'ara for the burial, but also the Sadeh surrounding it.
It's a very important point, and in reality, every time that in the Tanakh we have a case where the Jewish people purchased the piece of land in Israel from the original owner, it's very interesting that the Torah mentioned even the amount of money. Why should it make any difference today if it was 400 shekel or 1,000 or 100? The fact is that Abraham bought it, and the same with Yaakov when he buy like the area outside Shechem, it said B'mea Kasita, or when David buy the area where Beit HaMikdash is going to be built, it's also say that the Goren Arvana Ivusi was purchased with this amount of money that was collected from the Jewish people. Why is it important? The Tanakh found it very important and necessary to mention the details, the fine details of the deal, because as I said, this is not about purchasing a real estate. This is actually our way to materialize the promise of Hashem to give us this land.
Yeah, very, very poignant point. Um, I would say that there's another possible idea here, which is, and again, this is something that if you read the parsha closely, the original response of the Bnei Chet was that you don't need your own Avram. You're Nasi Elokim Ata B'tocheinu. You're this great man. You don't need to purchase. Just you take one of the family burial plots and bury your family together with our family. And it looks like Avraham was very intent. And again, he did it in a methodical, crafty way. But he wanted to make sure that this was not going to be the case. There was not going to be a mingling of the Jewish people, especially early on, with the other nations there. And he knew, like you say, that burial is really something, it's something that's forever. And that's not something where he was willing to mix in. And that's why maybe one of the reasons why he was willing to pay such an exorbitant amount to make sure that the nations don't mix. And it's interesting that the other main story of this parsha, which is the finding a wife for Yitzchak, was also stemmed from the same idea. So really, before his death, the last two acts or the last two statements of Avraham were really to say, listen, in Eretz Israel, that we cannot be assimilating into the land, both in terms of burial and in terms of kiddushin, in terms of the future generations. And it is interesting. You mentioned before that the yibum is connected to inheritance, but the whole law about how you can marry a woman and the most common way to perform kiddushin is through kesef, is of course learned from where?
Our parsha, Kicha Kicha Misdefon.
Exactly. The word, the shorish of lakach, to take, is learned from here. So marriage, which again is the rest of the parsha really, of Chayei Sarah, in a way through Chazal connected very closely to the beginning of our parsha, which is acquiring the מערת המכפלה. We haven't had a chance to really get personal on this podcast yet, but you're still in your year of Avelut for your father, Saba. Does it change the way you look at a parsha like this? Sarah dies, and there's this again nowadays. It's not the acquisition, and there is no negotiation or anything like that. But does it change the way that you look at this parsha for the first time after losing a parent?
Absolutely, yes. It bring it much closer to home. The feeling of avilut and the loneliness that a person feels after he loses someone very close, close to the way I understand the relationship between my mother, שתאריך ימים עד 120, your Savta, and my Abba. But I want to talk about a very powerful moment actually that took place in the Levaya itself. You know, you go to the Levaya and with the family, and you look around. My father was very smart after the passing of his parents. Um, they decided, my father and my mother, to purchase their future graves next to them. And I went there, and I was struck by my own grandparents, my aunt, my cousins, and for the first time I understood what is achuzat kever. Achuzat kever is something that is really ochez. It's something that brings you together, because listen, you look at that and you say, these are generations. This is not like one person, one couple. This is a family. The first time that I understood what is the power of family and legacy and continuing the traditions of one generation to the other happened in the cemetery. And I think this picture was exactly what Avram sought, and you quoted very well the wish of Yaakov to be in the same place, because he knew that future generations will come and they will understand a lot about themselves. This is a place with history. This is a place of generations that were together and lived together and died together. הנאהבים והנעימים בחייהם ובמותם לא נפרדו. And not like, a burial, just like a respect for a deceased person. By their burial, by their death, they actually infused life to what we call today Am Yisrael, and Am Yisrael Chai, because even in moments like this of Abraham and Sarah, they remember that they are not just a couple, they are the founders of the nation, and it was important for Abraham to have a place which is not going to be a kever, but achuzat kever, a place that through it the Jewish people for generations until this very moment are going to be achuzim in the land of Israel.
Beautiful. Again, it's a parsha that looks to be totally technical in terms of how much to pay and where to buy. And really, I think you brought out a lot of very important lessons here. We thank everyone again for listening to us, for watching us. Again, for your beautiful feedback. I continue to be struck by the quality of the people who are listening who have good feedback, which we're trying to implement into our conversation. And we hope you will listen this week and in future weeks. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.